Here we go. Welcome into the San Francisco 49ers Report. Chase Senior here with you. And on the Niners Report rundown here for today's show, we are going to preview San Francisco's Week 3 game against the Los Angeles Rams as the Niners hit the road for the second consecutive week. They traveled to SoFi Stadium for a get-right game against an NFC West foe. And the great thing about the NFL, even when you have a disastrous, ugly clunker of a game the week prior, you have an opportunity to get right the following week, and that's what the Niners look to do here in this spot against the Rams, a Rams team that is extremely banged up, and we'll talk about that here during today's show. San Francisco, 7.5-point favorites in this Week 3 tilt. The over-under set at 46.5 right now, so some points could be scored in this game, of course. Matthew Stafford, even though he has an offense that is depleted with a lot of his marquee offensive players at the skill position spots and along the offensive line, still capable of throwing for a lot of yards and putting up a lot of points on the scoreboard. And this Niners offense was shut down last week by Brian Flores, the defensive coordinator for the Minnesota Vikings. And even though San Francisco will be without Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey, some all-world players on that side of the football, it is going to be a 4:25 p.m. Eastern kick, 1:25 p.m. Pacific out there in California. And I think the line is pretty telling. Even though the Niners were flustered by that Vikings defense, still 7.5-point favorites in this game. Before we preview this matchup, be sure to join us on Sunday right here on the Niners Report. Our first watch party, Week 1 against the Jets, 230,000 views. On Sunday against the Vikings right here on the channel, 130,000 views. And we'll be live once again for this game, Niners-Rams, on the 49ers Report. So this is always a great rivalry between San Francisco and Los Angeles. You have the component and the storyline of Sean McVay going up against his former boss in Kyle Shanahan. And Kyle Shanahan in the regular season has really owned Sean McVay when the two match up. And they're both great offensive minds. And both teams throughout the bulk of Shanahan's tenure and the bulk of McVay's tenure have been very competitive. They've played high-level football and high-level playoff games. San Francisco, 4 NFC title appearances and 2 Super Bowls over the last 5 years, and Sean McVay and the Rams winning the Super Bowl a couple of years ago during the 2021 season when these two teams met in the NFC Championship game. And when the schedules came out for both the Niners and the Rams, we looked ahead to this Week 3 matchup as a much-anticipated game between two teams that were going to be duking it out to win the NFC West and jockeying for playoff positioning in the NFC standings. But it just doesn't have the same appeal any longer because of how the Rams are wounded. It's hard to believe how injured and banged up this Rams team is through just 2 regular season games. And the Rams so far 0-2. They lost Week 1, a tight game against the Detroit Lions on the road, and then they come back home to take on the Arizona Cardinals. And Kyler Murray was nearly flawless. And in both of their matchups, they've suffered injury after injury after injury. And when I said it's hard to believe how banged up they are, look at the notable Rams injuries going into this game with all of these players out for this Week 3 game against San Francisco. Wide receiver Cooper Kupp suffered an ankle injury against the Cardinals. He's going to be out weeks, could land on IR. Safety John Johnson, shoulder injury. He's out 4 to 6 weeks. Left guard Jonah Jackson, shoulder injury, likely going on IR as well. Wide receiver Puka Nacua re-injured his knee in Week 1 against the Lions. He's on IR with the PCL strain. Offensive lineman Steve Avila out with the knee injury. He's on IR. Joe Noteboom, ankle injury, also on injured reserve. Quarterback Darius Williams, hamstring. He's on IR. And tight end Tyler Higbee last year tore his ACL and his MCL. He too is on IR and will miss at least the first 4 weeks of the season. So there is absolutely no excuse for the San Francisco 49ers to lose this football game. They're the healthier team, even though they're a little bit banged up, and they're the better football team. But the NFL is crazy. There's a lot of parity, and shocking things can happen week in and week out. And all of the teams that have been 5+ point underdogs in the NFL so far this year, a lot of those teams have been able to win their matchups. So like I said, you never know what's going to happen week to week in the National Football League. And although the Niners are a better team and a healthier team as compared to the Rams, this 49ers defense will still have their hands full because of this duo right here. Sean McVay is one of the best offensive minds in the NFL. Play designs, play calling, offensive system. And Matthew Stafford might be the best quarterback in the NFC. And this 49ers defense has been struggling to start the year. These numbers are disgusting. They are giving up 21 points per game. That is 15th in the NFL among 32 teams. San Francisco is also surrendering 334.5 yards per game. That is 20th. 6.5 yards per play. That ranks 30th among 32 teams. And this is what is just ridiculous. And it's unacceptable. Nick Sorensen's defense giving up a third down at a 59% clip. Or giving up a first down on third downs at a 59% clip. So a third down conversion rate, to simplify that, 59%. That is 31st in the National Football League. And when teams get inside the 20, they are scoring touchdowns at a 60% clip. That is 24th in the NFL. So we were told after the Niners lost the Super Bowl to the Kansas City Chiefs back in February that it was a Steve Wilks problem, that he was to blame for all of the Niners' defensive issues. And then San Francisco hired from within, and they elevated Nick Sorensen to defensive coordinator. And I know that it's early, but this is an inexperienced defensive coordinator with the defensive unit with a lot of star power. But in the first 2 weeks, we've seen red flags, even against the Jets when the Niners won that game. And then definitely against a Vikings team who has Kevin O'Connell calling the shots, who's a great offensive mind in this league. So bottom line is that this Niners defense has to play better. And my two biggest issues with the defensive side of the ball for San Francisco, they can't get off the field on third downs. And their pass rush has been non-existent. This is also a Niners team that was supposed to have improved against the run, and there have been some gaps with their run defense as well. A lot more to get to here during our Niners-Rams preview. We're only ramping up, but first, get your game predictions in. Who you got? SF for the Niners, LAR for the Los Angeles Rams. Let me know, and I'll give you my game prediction coming up here in just a few moments. Prize Picks making today's 49ers Report possible. America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike on other apps on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you watch the winnings roll in. And if you sign up today by going to prizepicks.com/CLNS and you use the code CLNS, you get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. And I know oftentimes we'll give you Niner picks, but let's inform you on what's going on around the rest of the National Football League. There is a great Prize Pick special throughout the month of September, more than a half passing yard for Caleb Williams. I know he's been rocky, but he's going to throw for a yard or more. Ramondre Stevenson, running back for the New England Patriots. I like the more than 67.5 rushing yards against the New York Jets, considering the Jets' struggles against the run. And then Garrett Wilson, more than 65.5 receiving yards against the New England Patriots. So sign up with Prize Picks today. Download the app, create an account, pick more, pick less, pick Prize Picks, run your game. Head to prizepicks.com/CLNS. My keys to the game for the Niners to get above 500 and to move that record to 2-1. Quarterback Brock Purdy, it's time to earn your money. Deebo Samuel, not going to play in this game because of a calf injury. He's out a couple of weeks. Christian McCaffrey, we already know he's not going to play in this game. He's on IR with the calf and an Achilles injury. And then Ricky Pearsall, who I think could really help out this team right now with their lack of separation issues at the wide receiver spot. He's out after taking that bullet to the chest. So there are Brock Purdy detractors everywhere, especially after this game against Minnesota. People think that he stinks and they've said Brock Purdy only has success because of his supporting cast. Well, now that Brock Purdy is without Deebo, he's without CMC, the reigning Offensive Player of the Year, your opportunity to shut everybody up and shoulder the load and carry this offensive unit. Now, to start the year, there's been some good and bad with Purdy. He leads the NFL in passing yards. His completion percentage over expected is second in the NFL, meaning that he's having to fit the ball into some really tight windows. His average completed air yards is 8.4. That's third in the NFL. His quarterback rating is 10th. But at the same time, his offensive line has not helped him. He is fourth in being sacked in the NFL among all quarterbacks. His time to throw, though, is ninth slowest at 2.9. So he is holding onto the ball long, but I think that's because his receivers aren't really getting open. His pressure rate is 20th overall, but his average sack per dropback rate is the worst in the National Football League. And a big reason for that, his average receiver separation is last in the NFL. That has to do with his receivers not getting open, as well as the offensive scheme. He leads the NFL in tight window throw rate, so he's been highly accurate, but that's stressful for a quarterback and taxing for a quarterback, and his receivers just aren't getting open like they have in years prior. Key to the game number 2, Brandon Aiyuk. No more excuses. You got the bag that you were seeking. You got the contract that you wanted. And with CMC and Deebo Samuel out, it is time for you to step up and earn your money. And Aiyuk, through 2 games, is off to a slow start. He said after the Vikings game, he's at about 85%. He's looked out of shape and winded. And I think that he's lacking his normal explosiveness and speed. We know Brandon Aiyuk having that short area quickness, the long speed to take the top off of the defense, being a complete X outside wide receiver with everything to his route tree. But it's not a good look when you sign that lofty deal and you don't practice all summer, you get paid, and you've pretty much been a non-factor so far. Now, I want to see Kyle Shanahan target him more, and there's no excuse not to without McCaffrey and without Deebo, but after signing that 4-year, $120 million contract, and after Aiyuk got $76 million in guaranteed money, he has 6 catches for 71 yards and no touchdowns in the first 2 games. His longest catch is 22 yards, and his average separation is 4th lowest. Now, some context there, that separation number is when a receiver is targeted, and he's been open other moments throughout the first 2 games, but he's also dropped passes. Got to get it together, and you have to ramp it up. Number 3, to the offensive line for the Niners, take some pride in your work. Week 1, you were very dominant against the Jets, and you were getting spun around, pushed back, and placed on your ass. Week 2, against that physical Vikings defensive front. The Niners' offensive line in Week 2 gave up 13 pressures and 6 sacks. Those were both career worst marks for quarterback Brock Purdy, and across the board, nobody came to play. Colton McKivitz gave up 6 pressures, a team high. Trent Williams gave up 4. At one moment, he was spun around and put into the lap of Brock Purdy. He gave up 1 sack in that game as well. Dominic Pooney had to work with the silent count for the first time. He gave up 3 pressures. Aaron Banks, 2 pressures and a sack. And Jake Brendel is one of the worst starting centers in the NFL. He surrendered 2 pressures, So this Niners offensive line, great in Week 1, awful in Week 2. What's the story of this offensive line going to be? It was a big concern for me going into this year. They have to step up, help out their quarterback, and help out this offense. And for the defense, fix your flaws. Generate a pass rush against Matthew Stafford, who, if you do pressure him, can put the ball into harm's way. Stop the run and get off the field on 3rd down. A 3rd down conversion rate of 59%, with how much talent is on that side of the ball and how much money is getting paid to some of those players on the defensive side of the ball, is simply unacceptable. And when the team gets inside the red area, force some field goals, keep them out of the end zone, and these other numbers aren't good either. 6.5 yards per play, it's not going to cut it for a team that has Super Bowl aspirations. But what helps out a struggling offensive line? When they can move downhill, when they can get in a groove, they can get that physicality meter ratcheted up, and they run the rock. The Niners offensive line in this game, they like to run the football. And I thought that the game plan for San Francisco, especially early against Minnesota, when you come out and you just pass it 3 straight times, made no sense. When you get toward the goal line, inside the red zone, run it with Jordan Mason, who is clearly a special player, a unique player with the physicality that he brings to the table, and he can help out your offensive line where they get that confidence going, and then it makes your offense more balanced. And I didn't think that the Niners offense, with their play calling, had enough balance against Minnesota. And because of that, Niners offense really struggled to find a groove all throughout the afternoon. So predict the score here, Niners-Rams. We'll do a lot more content on this football game all throughout the week in the lead up to Sunday. I know that I was so down on the Niners after losing to Minnesota. I do think this is a get-right game in a get-right spot, and it's time to eat up against a Rams team that is so injured, that is nowhere close to the team that people were expecting going into this year because their depth is getting tested, and they're without so many marquee players. So I do think that San Francisco, they can go to Levi Stadium South, just outside of Los Angeles. Kyle Shanahan, for the most part, has owned Sean McVay in the regular season, and they come out with the victory. 30-20 is my final score, and the Niners get that record to 2-1. Plenty of great content to come all throughout this week. Watch party coming up on Sunday. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and as always, thanks for supporting the show.